Hello, my name is Idriss. I'm the founder and CEO of Idriss Publishing House. Today is the second last day of the writing challenge. The book is completely finished. I'm actually just editing chapters now. My stomach's turning just thinking about it because I'm so nervous. It's been it's day 28 of the writing challenge, so I have 2 more days until the book is going to be published. It's really exciting. I do have some advice for writers. My best advice would be to pick a time of day and schedule as much as possible and really steadily and readily to attempt to ensure that you do as much as possible. Especially, I always find that if you pick a certain time of day to always do your work, it doesn't just become work, it becomes a way of life, and once it becomes a way of life, you find it a lot more fun. You tend to want to work harder, which is also quite interesting, because I write about crime and I've written about crime for years now. So when you become into something to the extent to which I find it like that exciting, it's really interesting because you find yourself like always drowning in work and also enjoying picking work apart and learning new interesting case studies and learning about yourself in many different aspects as well. So I find that really interesting. So schedule, and make sure it's part of your routine. So you breathe, think, live, writing. My next piece of advice would be very organized. I find that the more organized I am, the more fun and easier it becomes to do work. To many extents, people always talk about that 20-80 division, and I always think that in many aspects, like when you think about the 20-80 division, you think 80% so much work and 20% chill time. But I find that if you organize that 80%, you'll find you have a lot more time to do what you want to do instead of what you have to do or what you expect of you to do, which is really bizarre. Other piece of advice I would be is if you are writing a book on traveling, go traveling. If you are writing a case study on, for example, let's just say I was writing a book on Jack the Ripper and the prostitutes that were killed during the Victorian era. Go to frigging see the place. It will give you a feel for it. It will provide you with what you need to effectively and properly describe. You cannot talk or write about something if you have not seen or done it. That's another point that I feel extremely strongly about. So go do that. Go get your hands dirty. Go, do what you gotta do, Another point would be if you want to do something on a specific topic and you're halfway through your book and you realize that you want to change your perspective because of the amount of research you've done or something like that, do as much research as possible before you start your book, because once you start your book, you do not want to change your perspective. You want to know your perspective. You want to breathe your perspective. You want to talk about your perspective on a day-to-day basis. You want to learn as much on the topic that you're talking about. I'm not telling you to claim to be an expert on the topic of hand, but I am telling you to do as much into that piece of research as humanly possible. Otherwise, you're going to be claiming to be an expert on a topic that you don't know enough about, which is the worst feeling that you can have when you're writing a book. You should feel as if you know the book backwards. You should feel as if you can read this book and write it in your sleep. That is how it should feel. Another piece of advice, I know these sound quite harsh, but I'm speaking from experience, and I don't actually think they're harsh. I think it's kind of the reality of being an author. I also find that some people, like Nietzsche, Socrates, well, not Socrates, but Nietzsche and Marx, found it really easy to wake up really early in the morning to do work, and did work for certain hours and so on. Some people find it easy to do work at night. Do work at night. I'm a very big night owl. I will admit it. You know, I love to work at night. Simply because it's really quiet. It's dead. There's no one around. The house is so peaceful. And there's very little distractions. So find what works for you and stick with it. That's what my advice would be. Another one would be, if you think that you should write your introduction before you start your book, I would not recommend it, because you still don't know what your book is about or how it's going to end up. So my advice would be to write a research proposal. Propose to yourself what you want to write about. Think about how you want to write about what you want to write about. Think about what topics are the core themes of your book, because you want a consistent idea within your book. You don't want it to be like A, Z, you know. That's a big mistake people make. Another one would be to think about what you want to write about, and write a research proposal asking yourself key questions that you will evaluate and critically evaluate within the book, and then stick with it. That's for non-fiction, because I mainly write non-fiction. However, for fiction, the idea is pretty much the same. You want to know who your characters are, who your protagonists, who's your antagonists. You know, what are the struggles within the book? What do you think are the main key issues within the book? What are the key ideas of your character that create your character and make your character who they are? So you want to still do the same thing, really, because otherwise you're kind of just wandering aimlessly like a headless chicken into the blue, you know, into the abyss, like, you know, you don't want to do that. So that would be my advice. It's been a crazy 28 days, but it has been really, really good, and I've learned a lot from it. So yeah, that would be my advice. Another really good point would be to write. I write a journal on a day-to-day basis about my work. So it talks a lot about what I do, what I learn. So it actually supports me to provide consistency within my book. So I would definitely recommend that you do that. It doesn't work for all people, but you can also have little audio books to record your thoughts about your work. I used to actually do it every night. So I would definitely recommend that. Another point would be, if you could make as much notes on the topic that you're writing about. I always carry a little pen and a pad with me everywhere I go, so that I can document everything on the topic that I'm writing about, any ideas. so they don't just escape my head. Some people prefer to make recordings. I do both, but I prefer my pen and pad because it's the most reliable thing and it'll always be there, never disappear. Another point would be to try to document as much as you can on the book, because when it comes to marketing your book, you already have a lot to write about or talk about or tell people about, because you already know who you're writing it for, what you're writing it about, the way it's supposed to be written, who's going to find it appealing, where you want your book to be sold, you know, so you will know all that by the time you finished it. Because if you're writing it academically, obviously it'll be colleges, schools, universities, but if you're writing it, let's just say that you're writing it from a different aspect and you're writing a fiction book, and you are writing for a 16 plus audience, 18 plus audience, then you also know that. So that's why a research proposal is really useful, and documenting as much as you can is quite useful, because when it comes to you panicking about what your next chapter is going to be about, you can always refer back to it and you're just like, yeah. So that's really useful. Another really good piece of advice would be, not everything that you read on the internet works for everyone, so find what works for you and see how it appeals to you, which is why I always find journaling everything to be really useful. So please visit my website at www.amalidriss.com, and please make a donation to Burma's Orphans at www.idrisspublishinghouse.com. Thank you. I hope you found this advice really useful. I've been told I can be quite blunt, but it's not such a bad thing. So thank you. I hope you found the information I provide on the website really useful, and make a donation to Burma's Orphans because they always inspire me to work harder, do better, try harder, jump higher, skip faster. So I definitely recommend that. So yeah, happy writings. Good luck with your work, your writings, your fiction, non-fiction, blogging. Best of luck, everyone. Thank you. Idriss Publishing House, and best to inspire.